passage is from Philippians chapter 3, verses 13 through 14. Philippians 3, 13 and 14. Brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. We have some members of this church who, either currently or in the past, run cross country. I don't understand that. You just run. You're not running to score a goal. You're not running after the ball. You just run. Apparently, I just don't understand cross country at all. I'm sorry, Tom?
Best sport ever.
Best sport ever. Well,
in most sports, running is considered punishment, but in cross country it is a thrill.
yeah. People get so into this, they actually run marathons on purpose. They have nothing chasing them, yes. I think I once before told you the story of the marathon. It came from an event in 490 BC. The Greeks had just fought a battle with the invading Persians near the city of Marathon. And after a great victory, a Greek messenger named Philippians ran the 26.25 miles from Marathon to Athens. And when he got there, he shouted one word, Nike, which means victory, and then died of a heart attack on the spot. And somebody thought it was a good idea to make that into a sport. Something I just learned this week is this is not a very old sport. The marathon was not a part of the original Olympics. It was created in 1896 for the modern Olympics. When the first modern Olympics was held, the creators of the Olympics wanted to have a way to tie the new games back to their ancient history. And so they created a new long-distance running event based on the run for marathon. The Greeks, of course, were ecstatic about this. They were proud of this callback to their national history. They were also the only ones who took it seriously. In the first Olympics, the Greeks created an entire new training program from scratch just for this event. Nobody else did that. In fact, by the time it came for the games, other than the Greek competitors, only one guy had bothered to actually run a marathon before the day of the event. And the lack of training showed very quickly. Nearly half the competitors did not finish the race. There was one guy from Greek who just flat out cheated. He got on a horse and rode half the way. He got caught and disqualified. But there was another fellow, a guy named Sidian Lewis, who won the gold, and he won it by a lot. He was so far ahead that with 2 miles left to go in the marathon, he stopped at a local restaurant and sat down for a glass of wine. Then got up, finished the race, and still won by more than 12 minutes. Now that's a guy who trained for the race. That's a guy who came to compete. Well, today, we're going to continue our Olympic theme. Last week we talked about training. Today I want to talk about competition. In today's passage, Paul again takes up a sports analogy for the Christian life. Once again, talking about running a race. Now last week in 1 Corinthians, we looked at how Paul said that every runner goes into strict training for the race. Today's passage, Paul moved on from training to the competition. Paul wrote, I do not yet consider myself to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and pressing on to what is ahead, straining for what is ahead, I press on to the goal, which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. In those 2 verses, Paul tells us 3 things about this Christian race. First, Paul says, we're not there yet. Paul wrote, I have not yet taken a hold of it. So what is it that Paul has not taken hold of? Well, he tells us earlier on in verse 10. Paul wrote, I want to know Christ and share in his suffering. and conform to the fellowship of his death, that I might somehow attain resurrection from the dead. Now I imagine that Paul was a mature believer. He wrote the Bible, at least part of it. Of all the billions of Christians over the years, Paul's got to be in the top 20, right? And yet Paul wrote, I have not yet taken hold of it. Paul recognized that he was not there yet. So where do Christians get the idea that we can be there? Paul wanted to know Christ fully. He wanted to live in God's grace. He wanted to live how Jesus lived and love how Jesus loved. Even if it meant physical death, or at least dying to himself, Paul wanted to know God fully. If Paul said he wasn't there yet. And some Christians seem to think that we can get there, that we can fully, perfectly live out the Christian life. I think Paul warns us against that. And in this, there's both a warning and an encouragement. The warning is against arrogance. Sometimes Christians get the idea that they really can fully live out Christ. And when we get that attitude, when we think that I have attained everything there is to attain in Christ, then we quit training. And that's when things fall apart. When a runner stops training for the run, when a runner thinks he can't be beat, that's when he gets beat. When, as Christians, if we ever think that we've attained everything there is to attain in Christ, then we stop seeking the Lord. And nothing can be more destructive to our souls than that. Beyond that, it can create an attitude of looking down on other people. Because when other people are not as just or as kind or as merciful as I think I am, then I put myself above them. It creates a judgmental attitude that Christ warned us against. On the other side, there's an encouragement here. Because Paul, an apostle, a man called by Jesus in the flesh, still said, I'm not there yet. I have not taken hold of this. We all sin. And I know when I fall in sin, I am quick to beat myself up. I mean, I'm a preacher. Preachers are supposed to have this God stuff down. And yet I struggle. In Paul's words, I find encouragement. Not an encouragement that somehow I'm going to live a sinless life. That is not going to happen in this world. But I find hope in the fact that even Paul, even the apostles, struggled as they sought God. This is not an excuse for sin. It's not saying it's just okay. But rather, it's recognizing that in this world we do have struggles. And even the giants of the faith still stumbled. But we have hope in a God who redeems us from sin and picks us up when we fall. And so Paul says that he's not there yet. Second, Paul tells us we forget what is behind. In a race, we don't look backwards. We keep looking forward. I know I have an Olympic theme going here, but I want to tell you a story that's not from the Olympics. August 7th, 1954. England's Roger Bannister and Australian John Lanby faced off for the first time in a mile run. In May of that year, Lannister became the first person in history to break the 4-minute barrier in running a mile. In June of that year, Landy had beaten Bannister's record by more than a second, running a mile in 3 minutes, 58 seconds. The two of them faced off in their first competition at the British Empire and Commonwealth Games in Vancouver. And everyone knew this was going to be a great race. At the time, they billed it as the mile of the century. It since has become known as the Miracle Mile. You'll recognize this was going to be a close race. I'll tell you right now, this is the first race in history where two people both ran a mile in less than 4 minutes. And for about 80% of the race, it looked like Landy was going to win. Both men got a good start, but Landy managed to get a few feet ahead of Bannister, and it looked like he was going to hold that lead the whole way. Then, with 90 yards left to go, Landy did what every runner knows you never do. He looked backwards. With 90 yards left, Landy looked back over his left shoulder to see where Bannister was. And at that moment, Bannister shot by him on his right and went on to win the race. In a race, we don't look back. It's true of a foot race. If I'm physically running, I don't look back. It's not going to gain me anything. It's just going to slow me down a little bit and probably cause me to make a mistake. Because if I'm going to run a foot race, I need to run my race. I need to run as fast as I can. If I'm running on where other people are, I'm going to make a mistake. Or either think I'm too far ahead and I won't try hard enough, or I might look back and see someone closing in and try a burst of speed, which will leave me too weak to finish strong. Nothing helps me by looking back. It just slows me down and makes it more likely I'll make a mistake. Same is true in our spiritual life. We don't look back. God is always calling us forward. We don't look back at past accomplishments. Hopefully we all have things in our lives that we are pleased with, things we think we've done right. But God is always calling us to what's next. And we don't look back at past sins. We all have it. We have all fallen in sin. It's over. It's done. We are forgiven and we are redeemed. And now God is calling us forward, to let go of the past and to look forward. For a while we had a volleyball team here in Mount Auburn until we shut down the league we were in. I was very upset. And one of my favorite things to say when we had a volleyball team was, all that matters is the next serve. Doesn't matter if we had a great play in the last serve or if we just made a dumb mistake. If we're just destroying the other team or if we're 20 points behind, all that matters is the next serve. Same is true in our spiritual lives. God is always calling us to what's next, to look forward. There will be ups and there will be downs in life. But God's always asking us, where do we go from here? He's always calling us forward so we forget what is behind. So, Paul tells us we're not there yet and that we forget what is behind. Third, Paul tells us we strain towards what is ahead. Paul calls us to keep moving forward, to strain towards what is ahead. I think Christians sometimes make the mistake of thinking that zeal for the Lord is something that just happens. I think this is an attitude we see a lot in this world. People think that passion in any area of life is something that you just kind of stumble into. I think, when I find something that's really important to me, then I will be passionate about it. Until then, I'll just kind of hang around. People seem to think that passion or zeal is something that just happens to them. I assume everyone here at some point in your life has seen a romantic comedy. Pretty much any rom-com movie ever made. One of the common themes of a romantic comedy is that the female lead falls in love when she's not looking for love. Because that's how you know it's real. If the lead were looking for a healthy relationship, then she couldn't trust it. For her to fall in love, it has to happen when she's not looking for love. I'm going to tell you something, just in case anyone here doesn't know it. Movies aren't real. In real life, the times that people find healthy, passionate relationships are when they are thoughtfully and actively looking for a healthy relationship. In every area of life, we don't stumble into passion or zeal. It's something we cultivate. And this is true of our relationship with the Lord. Zeal for the Lord is not something that's just going to happen. We are going to have to choose to strain forward. We have to cultivate that zeal in our lives. There's an old military saying that goes, if you're not advancing, you're retreating. If you're not moving forward, then you're falling back. Might not always feel that way, but it's true. In our spiritual lives, if we are not moving forward, we are moving backwards. And zeal isn't something that's just going to happen. Now, there will be ups and downs. There will be times we naturally feel more energetic, more zealous for God. Those times we will feel less energetic. But a sustained passion and zeal for the Lord is something we have to cultivate. I know there are a lot of sins in life. There are challenges and temptations towards sin that can derail a Christian life. A temptation I think a lot of Christians underestimate is apathy. Simply not caring about what God is doing in my life. Because I seem to think that zeal is something they'll fall into, but it's not real. Zeal is something we have to cultivate. And this goes back to what I was talking about last week when it comes to training. If we are going to have zeal for the Lord, it is something we need to train our souls for. We train our souls by seeking God in prayer, in Bible study, in worship, in tithing, in service, in fasting. We train our souls to have zeal for God. It's not something that just happens by itself. Paul has called us into a great race. He calls us to forget what is behind us, strain for what is ahead. He calls us to keep moving forward in God. There will be ups and downs. There will be times of natural energy and times of natural apathy, but we train our souls to seek God. Because in any race, someone who does not train will not finish. When the going gets too tough, when things become difficult, they'll drop out. Or if they don't abandon the race entirely, they at least will find that this race lacks passion for them, that this faith that we have called to is without zeal. If we're going to have a zeal for the Lord, it's something we must train ourselves for. To forget what is behind and strain towards what is ahead. Of all the races we run in life, this is the one that matters. Run well. In a moment, we're going to stand for our invitation hymn. And as we stand to sing, if you really haven't been running this race, if you've been waiting for something to happen, if you've been waiting for God to move and letting life pass you by, and you want to see a change, if you want to seek the Lord actively, you have a chance today. Or this week, talk to myself, talk to one of the elders, but if you need to seek God zealously, he is waiting for you and calling for you. I ask you'll stand with me now for invitation hymn, which is number 529. Oh, how I love Jesus.